Hey, welcome to my re-review of the ThinkPad X230. I've had this machine for almost a year now. I've reviewed it on this channel, but now I'm going to be answering some questions that I got. Also going to be talking about my setup on this machine, some differences between ThinkPad models, and why I got it and why it's been a good purchase for me, and maybe why you should consider buying a used business laptop. So to start with, I'm going to be answering some questions. For example, battery-wise questions. So this machine has a 6-cell battery, as you can see. And I get pretty good battery life out of it. With my normal use cases, which is a text editor, a browser with like 2 tabs open, and maybe Spotify, I get around 6 hours of development done with this machine. So that's pretty good. And for example, watching videos and watching movies and really media intensive tasks, I get around 3.5 to 4 hours of use. So that's really good. If, for example, I were to upgrade this to a 9-cell battery, I'd get even more. These laptops have the option of either a 3-cell, a 6-cell, or a 9-cell battery. Of course, if you want more battery life, you could go for the 9-cell battery life, the 9-cell battery, but you have to know that this is the 6-cell that adds this height to the laptop, and the 9-cell actually protrudes from the back. So there's added weight in carrying around the 9-cell. So you have to see if that's a choice that's good for you. In my use case, the 6-cell is good enough. So, for example, I got some questions on performance. I use this machine for code development and setting up and experimenting with different programs, and I had no problems in terms of performance using this machine. Coding is a relatively light task. The only thing that's harder on the processor is the compiling of programs, the using it as a master node for something, and things like that. So I compile some programs with it, but I don't usually compile really big programs. So if you want to do that, I have compiled big programs. For example, Apache Hadoop, I had to compile it version 2.7, if I believe, if I'm correct. Yeah, I think it took about 30 minutes, I think. I left the room and then came back 30 minutes after, and it had compiled. So that was, and Apache Hadoop is pretty big. I compiled it from source, and it worked, and it was fast. I had it running once as a master node for a grid of 32 computers in Apache Spark, and it worked flawlessly. No bottlenecks, and the computers that were on the grid were all workstations, much more well equipped than this one. So performance-wise, I have no problems with it, and I recommend it completely. I got a lot of questions about the differences between the X230 and the X220. So I'm going to go at it again. The X220 and the X230 share the same kinds of screens. That's something that that's an error that I had on my first review. They share the same screens. So the differences are basically a slightly older processor on the X220 that doesn't really amount to much in terms of processing power, but in terms of integrated graphics, there's a very noticeable improvement on the X230. If you like light gaming, some gaming sessions between work, this one can actually do that, while the X220 really struggles at games that are really that intensive, like World of Warcraft, League of Legends, stuff like that. Um, and the other difference is basically the keyboard. The keyboard on the X220 is an older layout. Personally, I like the layout of the X230 much more than the X220's one. I've tried both of them out. The X220's keyboard is slightly more tactile and slightly more comfortable than this one. It's not really that noticeable. It isn't that huge a difference as people say it is. I didn't really notice it. Some people say there's a really big difference. That's okay. You can just put an X220 keyboard on the X230, and you have all of the advantages without any of the disadvantages, if you think this is a disadvantage. So that's that. In terms of CPU performance, it's basically the same machine. I got some questions about overheating. It's right now. Has some browser tabs open, Spotify, Visual Studio Code, some terminals running, and it's at 4 gigs of memory usage, more or less. It's at 3% CPU, so the CPU is idle. It's at 52 degrees, so it's very slight. Normally when I'm working, it's about 60. If I'm really pushing it, or if I'm playing a game, it's about 75 to 80. And 80 is really pushing it, so there's no overheating. I had no problems with overheating on this machine. Granted, I have new thermal paste. I cleaned it up not too long ago. I cleaned it up 5 months ago or something. Yeah. So it's still pretty good. I never had problems with it. So I don't think you're going to have any problems with it, except if you're really pushing it. But that's every machine. Now to talk about my setup. I'm running Linux, Ubuntu Mate with i3, and it has no compatibility issues with Linux. It's a really good Linux machine. You don't have the problems with, for example, discrete graphics. For example, NVIDIA graphics cards on Linux are a pain to deal with. They're really not comfortable. This has none of those problems. The Wi-Fi card is also pretty good. It has free drivers. I have almost no proprietary software on this machine, and it all just works. I have no proprietary drivers on the machine, and it works flawlessly. Okay, it does not crash. So there's that. Now to talk about some differences between ThinkPad models. This is the X series. There's a T series and a W series. There's more series than that, but these three are the main series. So the X is really focused on portability. The X2 somethings have 12-inch screens. They come with IPS screens, most of them, and they're really focused on portability. They're smaller. The T series is usually the midterm with 14-inch screens. Most of them, from I think the T440 and up, have options for IPS panels, but before of that they don't. And that's something really big, at least for me. I really hate TN panels, and the ones used in ThinkPads are especially bad. You can mod it, but this one, for example, is an IPS screen. I didn't have to mod anything. It's a really good screen, okay? So there's that. And then the W's are desktop replacements. They aren't portable, they're transportable. They're much heavier, but they have much better performance. So that's the price you pay. Now, why did I buy this X230? Why didn't I buy an X220? Why didn't I buy an X240? It all comes down to deals. And that's the main reason why you should consider buying a second-hand business laptop. It's the deals. These laptops flood the market with very low prices, and they're usually in really good shape. They've only seen office use, so they're most of the times they're in really good shape. This one had a little scratch on the lid. That's everything bad that it had, and the battery was was a 3-cell battery, and it was like at 50%, and it's an old laptop, so I only had to buy a battery, and I actually knew someone that had a battery, so it was a cheap deal. I got this for 200 euros, and that's a really good deal, at least for me. Why didn't I buy an X220? Because this one was cheaper than most X220s. Why didn't I buy an X240? Because most X240s were around 300 euros. So it all comes down to the deals. You have to search online, search eBay, search your local secondhand selling website and things like that, and try to find the best deals. That's how I found this machine. It isn't because, oh, I'm gonna buy an X230. I wake up one morning and I thought, I'm gonna buy an X230, and I didn't search for anything else besides an X230. That's not true. I combed eBay for X220s, X230s, X240s, and T420s, T430s, and T440s. And this was the best deal I found. Okay, that's it. Okay, and right now I'm super happy with this machine. I would definitely buy it again, and I say to everyone that's looking for a laptop, buy this. If you're not looking for a gaming laptop, these kinds of laptops are great options. Okay, so that's basically it, what I had to talk about. I'm thinking about doing a Linux series where I'll be talking about my setup, how to install a Linux distribution, differences in Linux distributions, how to install display managers, window managers, things like that, how to set up your coding environment, for example, things like that. I was thinking about that, or maybe doing some more ThinkPad videos. Oh, one quick thing. This screen isn't really that good for prolonged work sessions. It starts getting uncomfortable for more than 2 hours for session. So I have an external monitor to deal with that. If you don't want to get an external monitor, get a T series. Try to get a T440 or up and get an IPS screen. It's much better, it's much more comfortable. If not, buy an X series. It's portable when you need to. When you get home, you just put it to the side, you dock it, and you use your external monitor, and there's no problems. Okay, so now it's really it. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And if you have ideas on what I should do next, feel free to comment. That's it. Like and subscribe and stuff. See ya.